Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Chari Yamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai 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 Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotara Shatashish Mother's Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotara Shatashish Mother's Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, entitled The Creative Impetus, Chapter 11, Jad Bharat instructs King Rahugana, and we're on text 6. So if everybody could please repeat after me. Dukam, Sukam, Vyatiriktam, Cha, Tivram, Kalopapanam, Palam, Avyanakti, Alingya, Aya, rachitantaratma swadehinam sangshriti chakra kutaha dukam sukham vyatiriktam chativram kalopapannam palam avyanakti alingamaya rachitantaratma swadehinam sangsritir chakrakutaha dukam sukham vyatiriktam chativram kalopapannam palam avyanakti alingamaya rachitantaratma sadehinam samsrita chakrakutaha dukam sukham vyatiriktam chativram kalopapannam palam avyanakti alingamaya rachitantaratma swadehinam sangshrita chakrakutaha Dukam, unhappiness due to impious activities. Sukham, happiness due to pious activities. Vyatiriktam, illusion. Cha, also. Tivram, very severe. Kala upapanam, obtained in the course of time. Palam, the resultant action. Avyanakti, creates. Alingya, embracing. Maya rachita, created by material nature. Antarātmā, the mind. Swadehinam, the living being himself. Sangshriti, of the actions and reactions of material existence. Chakrakutaha, which deceives the living entity into the will. Translation. In commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The materialistic mind covering the living entity's soul carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusion, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. Purport. Mental activities under the influence of material nature cause happiness and distress within the material world. Being covered by illusion, the living entities are known as nitya-buddha, eternally conditioned. On the whole, the mind is the cause of... Being covered by illusion. I skipped that line, huh? Okay. Sorry, I didn't get much sleep last time. Being covered by illusion, the living entity eternally continues conditioned life under different designations. Such living entities are known as nitya-buddha, eternally conditioned. On the whole, the mind is the cause of conditioned life. Therefore, the entire yogic process is meant to control the mind and the senses. If the mind is controlled, the senses are automatically controlled, and therefore the soul is saved from the reactions of pious and impious activity. If the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, sarveṣāṁ kṛṣṇa-padāravindayoḥ, the senses are automatically engaged in the Lord's service. When the mind and senses are engaged in devotional service, the living entity naturally becomes Krishna conscious. As soon as one always thinks of Krishna, he becomes a perfect yogi, as confirmed in Bhagavad-gītā. Yoginām sarveṣāṁ mad-gatenāntarātmanā. This antarātmā, the mind, is conditioned by material nature, as stated here. Maya mad-gatenāntarātmanā svadehinam sangshriti chakrakutaha. The mind, being most powerful, covers the living entity and puts him in the waves of material existence. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshulan Balatam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karitivachalam Pangam Langaite Girim Yakipadamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinitanam Bancha Kopadribishta Kipa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, translation again. The materialistic mind, covering the living entity's soul, carries it to different species of life. This is called continued material existence. Due to the mind, the living entity suffers or enjoys material distress and happiness. Being thus illusioned, the mind further creates pious and impious activities and their karma, and thus the soul becomes conditioned. So once Srila Prabhupada was walking with a number of his disciples, Satsrup Das Goswami and others, and they were walking by a lake, and a man was fishing, trying to catch fish, and right when he was walking by, right when Srila Prabhupada and all of his disciples were walking by, the man caught a fish. Big fish. And from what it seems like the story, it wasn't that the man was trying to be offensive or rude or arrogant. He just seemed like a simple person, the kind of definition. But he held the fish up to Srila Prabhupada specifically, and he said, "Oh, would you like to enjoy some fish?" And then Prabhupada said, "No, that's okay." He said, "You enjoy." And then Prabhupada continued to walk with his disciples, and then he told his disciples, he said, "And suffer." Referring to that man. Okay, you can enjoy, but you suffer also. So that's what we see in the world, that whatever people try to do in material existence, trying to fulfill their material desires, they may get some sense of happiness, which Srila Prabhupada refers to in the Bhagavad-gītā as their worst enemy, because it continues their material existence, but they might get some sense of happiness, but there's always the flip side to the coin. Just like you flip a coin, there's heads, there's tails. So on one side of the coin is kama, or material desire. And kama just doesn't mean sexual desire, of course, that's also included, but means all different types of material desires. So on one side of the coin is kama, and the other side is dukkha, which means misery. So material desire, and then the other side is misery. So you can't, or we can't, separate them. Just like you can't separate two sides of a coin. They're connected. They're interconnected. You can't separate them. Or maybe you could try it, I don't know, but cut them in half or something. But practically you can't. People don't even try to, right? Cut a coin in half or something. So, so understanding this, first of all, we should try to understand this. This is being brought up in the Bhagavad-gītā and the Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's purports many, many times. And in Srila Prabhupada, understanding the nature of people, postmodern people or people nowadays, he wrote his purports very most intelligently for the particular audience he's speaking to. If you analyze some of the other acharyas' works, some of their writings, we'll see that the nature of their writings is in many ways different from Srila Prabhupada's writing. Of course, Srila Prabhupada is distilling and taking so many of their wonderful points they made, but he's also adding his realizations, and he's also adding specific emphasis on certain things that he feels his audience needs to hear. Like, for example, the dangers of illicit sex. Srila Prabhupada talks about it a lot. Whereas some acharyas in the past, because illicit sex was there, it's always been there, right? But it wasn't such a huge issue as it is now. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada mentioned it a lot. The dangers of illicit sex, yeah. So, for example, that's one thing. Prabhupada mentions many other things like that. And that was very intelligent. That was extremely intelligent. Why? Because just imagine, Prabhupada didn't talk as much as he did about the dangers of illicit sex. I mean, devotees, sometimes people don't understand that, although it's being mentioned in Srila Prabhupada's book so many times. What to speak if he didn't mention it at all, or to a very small degree? Because it's the disease of the modern world, their addiction, fascination, infatuation with this illicit sex business. It's just, like here it's being mentioned about the conditioning that the human being, that the living entity is experiencing. And it's quite strong. I mean, what body the soul has taken, it really identifies with the particular body and certain likes and dislikes. Like, for example, if you travel to China, or if you travel to China, even to the airport, even if you don't go into China, you just go into, you don't leave the airport. Noodles, they have water machines that pump out hot water, and everybody's with their noodles. They don't have such things in America. You don't see a bunch of people doing that. American airports. Or you go to I don't know if it's all of Europe, but you go to Italy or something, and they're very much into olives. Whereas in India, they're not so much. So these are just small examples of where a person's born, or a soul's born in the body of a hog, and they're immediately conditioned to like all types of abominable things, the most abominable things. Srila Prabhupada mentions often in his times. He used the word stool. I mean, unimaginable how a living entity could, yeah. Somehow or other, the modern disease is just as a pig is so addicted and attached to eating so many abominable things. The modern disease is people are so attached to this illicit sex business. I mean, it's like they just can't get enough of it. Like one time, Srila Prabhupada saw a billboard, and the billboard said, it's kind of strange. You know, there's all types of weird billboards, but strange messages. But this billboard said, "Is there sex after life?" So Prabhupada saw that billboard. Excuse me. After life. Is there sex after death? And Srila Prabhupada saw the billboard, and then he was commenting on it. And then he was saying, yes, the karmis, they say, well, if there's sex after death, then, not so bad, we don't mind dying. But anyways, extremely attached. Like anyways, it's practically everything they produce is tainted with that. Just as devotees are very attached to thinking of Krishna, to speaking about Krishna, similarly, the karmis are very attached like that, conditioned. So, but trying to understand what Srila Prabhupada is stressing in his purports, this need to not be infatuated with all of these things, materialistic desires, infatuations, to give that up, right? And to become attached, to become infatuated, to become addicted to that which is worth being addicted to, namely the holy name of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. It's actually worth being addicted to. That is, you could say, the goal, to become addicted to Krishna. But we have to reject all these other things. It's just something that has to happen sooner or later. Like if we have one foot in one boat, another foot in another boat, and they're both going this way. I mean, of course you could fall in but you want to hop in one boat or the other. So therefore our acharyas are saying, Kama dinam katina katita palita dornideshas tesham jata maina kṛṣṇa-padāravindayoḥ no pashanti utsri jaitan atyapate sampratam labdibhutis tvamayata sharanamabhai mam yukshvatmidase. So I think it's Madhavendra Puri, he's saying that, in how many ways have I tried to fulfill my lusty desires, my material desires? But he says, now my intelligence is awakened, and now I'm casting these material desires far away. I'm rejecting them, and I'm running to you, Krishna. Please engage me in your service. So, one is to reject, but two, we just don't reject, but we have to accept. And we have to accept service to Krishna, service to the spiritual master, service to the devotees. And to become enthusiastic about it. Utsaha nishchaya daryat tat tat karma bhavartanat sangatyagat satovite shadbhi bhakti prasidati. That enthusiasm, patience, confidence, so on. These are Rupa Goswami's this is the advice he's giving us, to be enthusiastic. And without enthusiasm, everything dies. Book distribution dies, Harinam dies, deity worship dies, temples die, devotees die. Everything dies without enthusiasm. The whole Krishna conscious movement is actually sustained by enthusiasm. Krishna conscious enthusiasm. So I remember Ananda Tirtha Maharaj one time. There's some brahmacharis here years ago. They're not here now, but anyways, they're good devotees. But he was mentioning to me one time, we were in India together, we were in Mayapur, and we were walking around there, and we were speaking, talking, and he said that, commenting on these brahmacharis, that when they're in the brahmachari ashram, their minds were not, and specifically towards the end of their stay in the brahmachari ashram, their minds were not so active. It means trying to think about how to please Krishna, think about how to do things for Krishna, think about how to spread Krishna consciousness. But immediately when they moved out, and they had to, and then they became grihasta, and they had to work for money, their mind became so active, how to make money, how to do this, how to do that, how to engage oneself, right? So we should try to have, our mind should be very active, not asleep. Means there's so many ways to spread Krishna consciousness, there's so many things to do for Krishna, and we should be trying, our mind should be actively thinking how to expand, how to do better. So this is a good sign. And sometimes, like here, we're talking about conditioning and the living entities experiencing distress and enjoyment, right? And sometimes people wonder, maybe sometimes people wonder, we hope, right? Why am I suffering? Of course, some people are just like really on, what do you call, like, say autopilot, just. But we hope sometimes people wonder, why am I suffering? Because those inquiries will lead us, or will lead people, hopefully, right, to inquire into the absolute truth. And Srila Prabhupada, I mean, it's very clear why people are suffering. And practically, there's only one reason. Krishna bule se jiva nadi bahirmukha etaiva maya tare deha samsara dukkha. So, due to turning their back on Krishna, who's there automatically waiting? Maya. Yeah, Maya. And she grabs a living entity, and it's this enticement. Oh, come enjoy. And as soon as there's some enjoyment, then there's immediately like someone's like, oh, here, I'll give you some, here, I'll give you some money, come here, and then they maybe give you the money, but then they hit you over the head with a club, So, so this is why people are suffering, because forgetting Krishna, turning their back on Krishna. That's why. So people, so it's an important thing to understand, because it's not that, okay, well, I joined the Hare Krishna movement and now I automatically understand that people are suffering. That's not, or I have full realization of how the suffering condition of humanity. That's not, it's not an automatic realization. Putting on certain clothes and whatever markings. But it's an important realization to have, that people are suffering without Krishna consciousness. And through the sincere practice of Krishna consciousness, through reading Srila Prabhupada's books, we will have that realization that people are suffering. So then what's the next step? Well, the next step is that, okay, well, let me do something for them. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now, in terms of conditioning, Srila Prabhupada said, he said that my American and European disciples, he said they don't fear Maya enough. They're not scared of Maya enough. It's kind of like this fearless, right? Fearless in the face of Maya. But Maya is, I mean, the material energy, it's extremely powerful. I mean, it's only due to the mercy of Krishna, mercy of the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas, that one could last one day, actually. Without their protection, then we're finished. So, also we see sometimes, I mean, I'm also, my body was born here in America, but, it's an American thing, kind of this rebellious nature, right? To rebel. Ravindra Swarup Prabhu mentioned one time how it's tough because we're teaching people, we're spreading Krishna consciousness, and we're getting all of these people to join who are rebellious by nature. Means they rebelled against their parents' instruction to be a good materialist. They rebelled against society, right? Means everybody's going this way, but the devotees, they're going this way. So there has to be a streak of rebellious nature in them to be able to do that, right? Courage. So Ravindra Swarup Prabhu was making the point that it's tough because you get all these people and then you tell them, okay, well, now you have to follow authority. Now you have to follow the spiritual master. You have to follow senior devotees. There's so many rules and regulations. So it could be a little challenging. But this tendency to be fearless, this tendency to be courageous, this tendency to be rebellious, we could engage this in the right way. Means we're fearless in our standing true to the principles of Krishna consciousness. We're fearless in approaching people to give them Krishna consciousness. We're rebellious against the dictations of Maya, right? So we could rebel, say, no, I'm not. Rebellious against our, we could say, material conditioning, could rebel. So yes, we should be daring, we should be active, we should be rebellious, but fearless, but to engage those in the right way. Or else it's just foolishness, really. Like someone told me recently, Michael Strauss, he was here last night. You gave that DVD to him. So anyways, Michael was telling me, he spent some time in Hawaii, and he said that in Honolulu, there's a particular cliff overlooking the ocean, right? Go figure. Surrounded by the ocean there. And of course, naturally, people do that, right? They see cliffs and want to jump into the ocean. And there's one here in Ocean Beach. Sometimes the brahmacharis go jump off and swim. But anyways, so there's this cliff there. And all of his friends were telling him, hey, you want to come jump up this cliff? And Michael said, okay, sure. I'm into cliff jumping. But this friend said, but it's very dangerous. What happens is the current's extremely strong. So the current of the ocean, it comes in, the waves, and then, they hit against the cliff, and then, they go back out. But you have to jump when the wave comes in, and you have to get out before the wave goes back out into the ocean. Or else, if you don't get out quick enough, the ocean will just take you out a very long ways, and there's sharks out there, and there's no rescue boats out there, and it's very difficult to swim back. So in other words, you're finished. So Michael, being a whatever, daring guy, he said, all right. And he said, according to his description, that sometimes there's like warning signs around these places, hey, don't jump, this and that. And apparently there was some, crosses, indicating that, oh, so-and-so jumped and, didn't make it back. And so, but still he said, okay, sure, I'll do it. Now, personally, I wouldn't do that. But anyway, so he did it. So, but his friend, he has to take, now I am going to relate this something too, by the way, but, so he had to take he had to follow the advice of his friends because they're going to tell him when to jump. Exactly. So you got to make sure they're the right friends, right? They might tell you the wrong time to jump, but so they told him, okay, 1, 2, 3, and he jumped. So he jumped. So then went in and he jumped. So that was all there, the water. So then he was happy. So he went out and he was going, yeah, I made it, and they're all telling him, get out, get out, and he's going, yeah, I made it. It's like, they thought they were telling him, hey, good job, and they're saying, no, get. So eventually he realized, oh yeah. So then he climbed up the cliff, and as soon as he climbed up, the waves went out, and so then he made it back up. So he was encouraging me, oh, you should do that next time you visit. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So yeah, we shouldn't think that, because the waves of material nature are very strong. So once a person, jumps into the waves of material existence or material desires, of course, there is some chance of getting out. It's not that it's impossible. But there is a great chance of just being swept away. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada would always advise to be very, very careful. And then following his example, devotees asked him one time, Srila Prabhupada, what are you praying for? He said, I'm praying to Srimati Radharani that I don't fall down, that I don't be swept away. So yeah, those are some thoughts on this particular verse. Does anybody have any questions?
Hare Krishna.
All right, you could ask.
One moment.
Okay. Dravida Prabhu wants to ask first.
Yes, I can wait. No problem.
Somehow, when you were doing the class, this phrase came up to my mind. I remembered something that was said many, many years ago when I was in Brooklyn, and the temple president there was Rupanuga. If you read the old Lilamrita, that's probably how you learn about him. He was a prominent figure.
He's there in the Lachua.
Huh?
He's there in the Lachua still.
Yes, I know. So he had this phrase, which is actually very interesting, and he called it, we have to develop a Krishna conscience. Krishna conscience. And I was just, in terms of what you were talking about, how the mind, because this whole thing is about the mind. How the mind is dictating to us. And in a normal course of society, people, one of the main things of education is to instill a sense of what's right and wrong in children as they grow up.
Yeah.
They have a strong sense of right and wrong. Oftentimes there's some religious component to that, right? And what's the idea is that when these urges come up and when you feel these things to do something that's clearly wrong, that you have a little voice in your head, your conscience says, no, I can't do that. I was taught this is wrong, it's bad, and so you're able to avoid that. And I couldn't help thinking about what, you know, the analogy or the what we have in Krishna consciousness, this event that I'm sure you're familiar with from reading Giriraj Swami's latest book, I'll Build You a Temple. If you haven't read that book yet, there's this incredible scene because it was a big battle between this guy, Nair, I forget what the first name was, who owned it. He had a whole scam going where he would sell the land, get the deposit, and then get the people off the land and keep the deposit. So he thought he could do that with Prabhupada. So Giriraj Swami was he even Swami at that? I don't know if
no, he's a brahmachari.
He was so young. He was like early 20s, right?
Yeah.
But Prabhupada saw in him the quality, you know, determination, intelligence to make him the president there. So he was in charge. So Dr. Nair, he was a real rascal. He had this idea of seducing Giriraj into a relationship with a prostitute. So he said, I want to meet you. Prabhupada was out of town.
Yeah.
So he describes it. He gets into the car, and there's this prostitute between him and Dr. Nair. And the door closes, and off they drive. And she starts, you know, touching him and doing all things. And he just said, oh, you know, I was a young man, my senses were going on. But then he thought, oh, this will be very hurtful to Srila Prabhupada, you know. And he, you know, must have pushed away, made it very strong, you know, he survived that.
Yeah.
And that's a really dramatic example of how we should internalize the desires of the spiritual master and what we know is right and wrong, and have that, which is part of, you know, which is Krishna, the super soul, as a voice in our head to avoid this rebellious activity, which can, as you say, can easily be applied to what we know from Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's this Krishna conscience idea is very important.
Thank you. Yeah, sometimes people, I mean, he describes her in that book. He describes her in that book as a well-known prostitute in Mumbai. And, you know, sometimes, whatever, people think, oh, you know, prostitute is a very kind of unattractive kind of, but very well-known prostitute, so, you know, she wasn't, you know, she means like a high class, society, So, but anyways, he thought in his mind that how will this look if Srila Prabhupada, you know, if I was to, you know, how would this look on Prabhupada? This was staying, you know, ISKCON, and so he rejected. And then he said that that he had the realization that that disciples of Srila Prabhupada love Srila Prabhupada more than they actually love themselves. You know, so, anyways, so yeah, it's an important principle to keep in mind, this idea of having the Krishna conscience, right? That voice in us. And no, I like what Navina Nirada Prabhu said yesterday. You know, because we were discussing similar thing, that so I can't do that. I'm a devotee. You know, I don't engage in that stuff. You know, so it's nice.
Hare Krishna. I met Mr. Nair's grandson in Atlanta at Patel Brothers, the place where Mahotsa did a lot of books. And it was so funny because he was like, you guys cheated my granddad. You took the land away from us. You should give it back. You know, you owe us, and this and that. And I was just getting a little glimpse of the Nair flavor, you know, by meeting this guy. And I was like, hey, this is great. I'm getting, you know, you feel like being transported through time and space. You feel like you're there, you're part of the thing, even though, you know, it's 50 years later and it's all kind of done and over. Yeah. So
wow, that's amazing.
It's just interesting to see how, like, people, Maya is relentless. She will never give up. So that's her job. She will come knocking on our door every day and say, I got a little free gift for you. A little free offer here. Are you ready for some teaser? You know, it's free. You can just, you can either just look, or you can touch, or you can, as you like. But some of the bachelors from the Bay Area, they took a 3-day trip to Vegas, of all places. And they just walked through the casino, and their mood was, only looking, no touching, right? So, but we know that Maya is a very sticky, it's very contaminating.
Yeah.
So we have to really nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
Otherwise, once we start rolling that dice, once we start jumping off that cliff, then it's very hard to get back out.
Yeah.
And you can become fish food. So
Yeah.
not such a great prospect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Bob, and then Tyler.
I just want to make a quick comment because I know Vijay Krishna Prabhu is going to ask an excellent question, and it'll take some time. I don't, Balaram, nice class. Do you remember we were coming back one time from Yudhisthira's house from a program, and we saw that billboard, and it had basically, it was suggesting against all 4 of the basic regs. There was gambling, illicit sex,
Well, I was trying to forget that, actually.
intoxication,
I'm just trying to.
and meat eating, all in one billboard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that, which maybe is good. I mean,
Yeah,
no,
probably.
which is good, but yeah, I don't remember that exact one. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's billboards that are suggesting all 4 and one, so crazy.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to comment one more thing on
Yes.
what Dravida Prabhu said about the Krishna conscience, having a Krishna conscience. Because I've made so many bad choices in my life. Recently, I've adopted the final question before I make a choice. This pleases Krishna how?
Yeah, that's nice.
It's helped considerably.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, Vijay Krishna. I had a question about how to preach to a certain type of person. It's a little bit sticky. It's something I've actually dealt with a little bit with my family and my better friends. So it's the first 2 words here, dukam and sukham.
Yeah.
It's easy with dukam because unhappiness due to impious activities. Look at your life, man. Clean it up. Why are you doing these things? You're better than this.
Yeah.
But sukham, happiness due to pious activities. These people think they're happy, and they're doing pious activities.
Yeah.
They're doing great in their minds, right? They're doing all I can. Hey, I'm happy. I'm doing charity. I'm volunteering. I'm taking care of so many nice people. So it's
How
difficult.
to preach to them?
Yeah, because we're devotees. We practice Bhakti Yoga. We know it
Yeah.
transcends these. And we can't get, here's the modes. Here's Krishna. Don't get entangled. There's reactions.
Yeah.
So if someone's doing really good and you see piety in them, and they're really
Yeah.
doing great, hey, man, turn that into devotion. How do you practically preach to someone like that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the times people need a crisis in order for them to wake up. It's like kind of wake-up call, like, hey, wake up. Because, yeah, especially with people who are doing well, they have everything going for them. So, yeah, it could be a little challenging to preach to such people. But then on the other hand, I mean, a lot of these people have a considerable, or at least some amount of goodness to them, wanting to help people, this and that. So, of course, we should always give everybody, as far as possible, Srila Prabhupada's books, because Srila Prabhupada's very patient, most patient. He's there, right, on the shelf, 365 days, right, waiting, years. So, and he's right when someone opens it, he's ready to speak to them. So to give him Prabhupada's books is important. To give him prasadam, it's a secret weapon of the Hare Krishna movement. Srila Prabhupada, there's discussion like that. So it does have an effect, actually, a positive effect on people's consciousness. And yeah, it really depends on the situation, because in every situation they're going to be different. How much are they puffed up? How much are they humble? What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? Are they open to you having a program at their house where you have kirtan and prasadam, and are they not open to that? Anyways, there's so many things to consider, so it's hard to give a general answer. But the main thing is to somehow or other influence them positively. A lot of the times people are, actually practically all the times, people are looking for a friend. Just like on book distribution, if a book distributor is able to connect with someone on the soul platform rather than the bodily platform, they're seeing them as a spirit soul, as a whatever. Then the person's more likely to take a book. They're thinking, oh, this person's seeing me as their friend, right? And they feel inspired. So when we're trying to give Krishna consciousness to others, people will be impressed by if we have the good qualities that we're manifesting in our dealings with them, and also just being their friend. But yeah, it really depends beyond the situation.
So to be clear, telling them they're not happy in their piety is going to give them bad reactions. That's not a good approach, because that's kind of the philosophical approach I've been taking.
It could be, it depends. If they're philosophical, if they're thinkers, Prabhupada said so many things to people that sometimes devotees would never say. I know very few who would say some of the things. Like, for example, Prabhupada was in India, and he was Mr. Seti. Mr. Seti he's a devotee, a great devotee. He helped with the Juhu project. But when Srila Prabhupada first met Mr. Seti, although Mr. Seti had inclinations, pious inclinations to Krishna, still, he wasn't a sadhana practitioner, strict. So Srila Prabhupada asked him one time, Mr. Seti said, so what do you do when you get up in the morning? And Mr. Seti said, well, I get up, I wash my face, I sit down and I drink some newspaper. I sit down and drink some newspaper. I sit down and I drink some tea and read the newspaper, and then I go to work. And then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, so what's the difference between you and a hog? He told him that, just like right. And Mr. Seti said, yeah, that's true. I should try to better myself. I should engage in some spiritual practice right in the morning. So it really depends. So in his Bhakti Vikas Swami, one time he was in America here, and he was with Ananda Tirtha Maharaj. They went to somebody's house, like I guess they were staying there or whatever, Indian family. And then Bhakti Vikas Swami went to their bookshelf, and he started taking off books. Now this is very bold, but he started taking off books, many books, and he was giving them to Ananda Tirtha Maharaj, a stack of books, his disciple, when he was a brahmachari. And so then Bhakti Vikas Swami looked at him and he said, throw him in the trash. And it was in front of the guest, in front of the people, the owner of the house. So later on, Lord Krsna, from Iran, used to live here, lives in Los Angeles, or he used to live in Los Angeles, in the ashram there. He said that he was getting initiated in, where's Rampad Swami located mostly? Yeah, Chicago, yeah. In Chicago, Radha Krishna was getting initiated. He's going to get initiated by Rampad Swami. So in the initiation ceremony, he turned over to this devotee, Indian devotee, and he said, oh yeah, I heard a story that Bhakti Vikas Swami came in someone's house and he was unloading all of his books from the bookshelf, and he told his disciple to throw them in the trash. And this devotee, this Indian devotee, was speaking to his he started blushing and looking kind of, and he said, oh, that was me. But he was sitting in the initiation ceremony. He's going to get initiated by Rampad Swami. So, it worked. But now, anyways, so it really depends. Where the people are. You also, you have to be like an expert surgeon. So if you cut too much, or, depends, so you have to be. Okay.
Krishna.
Vijay Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Balaram Prabhu, thank you very much. You're very kind. The quote from the purport related to the verse you chose for today, 5:11:6, is as follows. It is the last sentence of the purport. Quote, as stated here, maya rachita-antarātmā svadehinam sanshriti chakrakutaha, the mind, being most powerful, covers the living entity and puts him in the waves of material existence, end quote. So based on this quote, my question is as follows. Why is it that sometimes I hear from Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra that material existence could be compared to an ocean? Why not to a river? Why not to a lake? Why not to a puddle of water?
Well, because the ocean is the most powerful, right, in our experience. So, of course, there's some rivers that are very powerful, but the ocean is the most powerful. And it's a great analogy, the ocean, because, yeah, we can't measure it, right? It's immeasurable. So yeah, it seems to like analogy has to, and many times analogies have to be graphic, or they have to give us a very clear idea of what's being communicated. So using the ocean gives us a very clear idea. Yeah. Yes.
If you're thrown in the middle of the ocean, you have no hope of rescue unless you get someone to help you. If you get in the river, you can get washed up on the shore, puddle, there's no danger. So that's it's a hopeless situation, just like a forest fire. Or, that's
in the middle of the ocean, yeah, especially. So
that is your answer?
Well, for now.
It was an outstanding answer, mostly related to the contribution of Dravida Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So Daniel has a question, but I think we could discuss afterwards because they want to. Okay, Granted, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.